"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The road to Velen's Ford wound through a gray and weary land. Winter had not yet loosed its grip, and the air smelled of cold iron and pine sap. Geralt of Rivia rode slowly, his mare Roach, snorting clouds of mist with every step. The Witcher's cloak was heavy with frost, his medallion humming faintly at his throat, the sign of nearby magic, or perhaps just a warning carried on the wind. He had heard the rumors 3 towns back, travelers missing, wagons overturned near the ford, bones found gnawed clean. The locals spoke of a figure cloaked in shadow, seen at dusk, carrying a great scythe of bone and flame. They called it the Reaper. Most scoffed, as peasants often did, but fear had settled in the region like a sickness. When Geralt reached the outskirts of the village, he saw thatch-roofed huts hunched close together, their shutters nailed tight. Smoke rose from only a few chimneys. The frozen river whispered faintly under its thin skin of ice. A wooden sign creaked at the entrance, Velen's Ford. Geralt dismounted. The silence felt unnatural. Even crows avoided the place. He led Roach to the small inn, if one could call it that, a sagging structure with a crooked door and the smell of boiled cabbage leaking from within. The sign above it bore the faded image of a fish hook. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and tension. A handful of villagers sat by the fire, eyes flicking to the Witcher and away again. Geralt felt the weight of their stares. He was used to it. Witchers were not welcomed, only tolerated, and only when needed. The innkeep, a broad man with a beard like tangled rope, wiped his hands on a rag and approached. "You're one of them mutants," he said warily. "White hair, cat eyes. You hunt monsters, I do," Geralt replied simply. "Heard you've got one." The innkeep's jaw tightened. "We've got something, that's certain. Folks vanish by the ford. My wife's brother went 2 nights ago. Found his horse come morning. No rider, no tracks. Just blood and bits of torn cloth. Anyone see it? Some say it walks like a man but carries a scythe. Comes with the fog, cuts men down without a sound. Old Ilsa swears she saw it drag a soul right from a body." Geralt frowned. "A wraith, then. Maybe a grave-born spirit. Where's your alderman?" "Back of the square. In the big house with the red door," the man said. "But if you mean to go, go armed. He's half mad from fear, and the rest of us ain't much better." Geralt nodded, ordered a bowl of stew for the road, and left. The alderman's house was as described, larger than the others, though its door hung unevenly. A man in his 50s opened it, face pale and lined, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. "I'm Geralt of Rivia," the Witcher said. "I hear you've a contract that needs taking." The alderman hesitated. "You'll want coin, I suppose?" "I don't work for free," the man sighed. "Then you'll have it. 40 crowns if you rid us of it. 50 if you bring proof." Geralt's brows rose slightly. "You've a generous purse for a village this small." The alderman looked away. "We've had trade. The ford's on the Redanian route, but that's gone now. No one dares cross. The merchants whisper our name like it's cursed." Geralt folded his arms. "Tell me everything you know." The alderman leaned against the doorframe, voice low. "It began 3 weeks ago. First, a woodcutter vanished. Then a pair of travelers. always at dusk, always near the old battlefield north of the river, from the war with Nilfgaard, 15 years gone. Some say the souls of the dead still wander there. But this thing, his voice broke slightly, it kills with purpose. Not hunger, not madness, just purpose. Geralt's medallion trembled again. Where do I start looking? There's a shrine at the crossroads, half buried in the snow. That's where most disappear. But take care, the fog comes quick after sunset, and the air turns strange. You'll hear whispers, see shapes in the mist. Don't follow them. None who did have returned. Geralt thanked him and left without further word. He knew fear when he saw it, but there was more here. A tightness in the man's tone, a hint of something unsaid. By the time the Witcher reached the ford, the light was fading. The sky burned orange behind the skeletal trees, and mist began to pool along the river banks. He tied Roach to a fallen post and crouched near the frozen water. Prince, light, elongated, almost human but for the claw marks. He touched the ground, sniffed the air. The scent of decay lingered faintly, mingled with pine resin and burnt wood. Then a whisper, soft as breath. Leave this place. Geralt's hand went to his silver sword. He turned slowly, scanning the mist. The voice came again, closer now. The dead do not rest. The harvest begins. A shadow moved across the fog, tall, gaunt, and silent. It seemed to glide rather than walk, and in its hand gleamed something long and curved. A scythe, black as night. Geralt drew his blade, the steel singing faintly in the cold air. The figure paused, as if watching him. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it dissolved into mist. The Witcher stood alone at the ford, the echo of the whisper fading into the night. He waited, every sense alert, but nothing moved. Only the wind sighed through the reeds, and far away, a wolf howled. Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. Whatever haunted Velen's ford, it was no simple spirit. It had purpose, and purpose meant mind. He turned back toward the village, the mist curling at his heels. Somewhere in that darkness the Reaper was waiting. Dawn came gray and brittle. The river glazed in thin ice that cracked beneath the hooves of passing horses. Geralt had not slept. He stood at the window of the inn, watching the first light bleed into the mists beyond Velen's ford. Somewhere out there in that pale fog, the Reaper waited, and the Witcher intended to meet it again. Though on his own terms, he strapped on his gear methodically, leather, chain, steel, and silver. His potions glinted faintly in the light. Swallow, tawny owl, and a vial of moon dust, each marked by habit and purpose. He loaded bombs into his belt pouch, checked the edges of his swords, then pulled his cloak tight and stepped into the cold. The villagers watched him from behind shutters as he crossed the square. Fear had turned them to ghosts already. A child peeked from a doorway, clutching a wooden doll, missing an arm. Geralt met the child's eyes for a moment, wide, uncertain, then looked away. At the ford, frost had silvered the reeds, and mist still clung to the water's edge. Geralt crouched, examining the prints from the night before. They had deepened, fresher, heavier. Something had passed through again before dawn. The Witcher traced the marks upstream, following the faint line of disturbance in the snow. The trail led into the forest toward the ruins of what had once been a watchtower, long since shattered by war. Crows watched from the treetops. The air was still, the silence thick. Geralt moved with deliberate caution, medallion vibrating faintly at his chest. magic and not weak. The ground was littered with bones, not human, mostly animal, yet all gnawed clean. He found something else too, torn cloth, dark with dried blood, caught on a thorn bush. He knelt, turned at the fabric between his fingers. Redanian colors, soldier's garb. Not just travelers then, he murmured, and not random. Something flickered in the corner of his vision, a wisp of pale light weaving between the trees. He turned, sword half drawn, but it vanished. The Witcher stood still, eyes narrowing. Illusion or lure? Either way, it meant danger. He pressed on until the trees thinned, revealing the battlefield. Even after 15 winters, the land bore scars of war. Mounds of broken armor, shattered carts, the long dark humps of forgotten graves. A shattered banner hung from a pole, its symbol worn beyond recognition. The air reeked faintly of old rot and wet earth. Geralt felt it before he saw it, that deep, thrumming pulse of ancient power. The forest here lived, but not naturally. He could sense the roots tangled deep beneath the soil, bound by something older, something cursed. He approached a blackened oak at the heart of the clearing. Its trunk was enormous, its bark carved with strange runes that pulsed faintly red. The remains of fetishes hung from its branches. Bones, feathers, the skull of a fox. A druid's work once, or perhaps something darker. The Witcher reached out, fingers brushing the bark. His medallion flared violently. The air around him shuddered, and the whisper returned. Louder this time, its tone like wind rushing through a crypt. The harvest must endure. The dead must not be disturbed. Geralt stepped back, sword ready. "Show yourself," he said evenly. "I don't harvest souls, I just hunt monsters." The wind rose, swirling the snow into ghostly shapes. From them stepped a figure, tall, cloaked in tattered gray, its face a skull of bark and shadow. The scythe gleamed like moonlight caught in ice. "You are not welcome here," it hissed, voice layered. One voice and many, echoing as if from beneath the earth itself. "I don't mean to stay," Geralt replied, "but you've been killing folk. I'm here to find out why." The Reaper tilted its head, hollow sockets burning faintly with green fire. They defiled the graves, burned the trees for coin, took what was promised to the forest. The Reaper guards what remains. Then you're not a ghost, you're bound. A low moan rippled through the clearing, like the wail of countless souls. The creature's form wavered, its outline shifting between spirit and flesh. Geralt saw it then, the faint lines of roots twisting beneath the ground, anchoring the thing to the cursed oak. A Leshen, an ancient one. He knew what that meant. Leshens were protectors of forests, spirits of nature bound to a place and purpose. But when their balance was broken, when the land was tainted or their pact betrayed, they turned murderous. This one had been awakened by war, fed on death, and twisted by the curse of a dying druid. Geralt raised his blade. "You want vengeance? I can understand that. But slaughtering innocents isn't justice." "They are all defilers," the Reaper growled. Its voice rolled like thunder. "Men bring only rot and ruin." "So I've noticed," Geralt muttered, stepping back as the creature lifted its scythe. The ground shuddered. Roots burst from the earth like serpents, lashing toward him. Geralt leapt aside, sliced through one root, then another. The silver blade hissed where it met the corrupted wood. He rolled through a moondust bomb. Light flared, searing through the fog. The Leshen screamed, its form flickering between shadow and matter. For a heartbeat, the Witcher saw faces, dozens, hundreds, trapped in the bark of its body, Soldiers, peasants, wanderers, the souls it had claimed. He slashed again, aiming for its heartwood, but the creature dissolved into mist. The forest fell silent once more. Only the oak remained, its roots still bleeding dark sap. Geralt straightened, breathing hard. His medallion still trembled faintly. He had not destroyed it, only driven it away. He needed to find the druid who had bound it, or what remained of him. As he turned to leave the clearing, a low sound reached his ears. Not from the forest, but from beyond it. Hooves. Many of them. Geralt ducked behind a shattered cart just as a group of riders emerged from the trees. Redanian uniforms, mercenaries by the look of them. Their leader was a man with a scar across his cheek and a crimson cloak draped over his shoulder. "Spread out," the captain barked. "We find that witcher, or what's left of him. The alderman says he's poking around places he shouldn't." Geralt's eyes narrowed. So that was it. Someone in the village didn't want him uncovering the truth. He watched as they dismounted, moving toward the cursed oak. The captain kicked aside bones and spat. "By the gods, this place stinks of sorcery. The sooner we burn it, the better." Another man hesitated. "Sir, maybe that's what's keeping the monster at bay." The captain sneered. "Monsters? Superstition? We'll clear this land and the crown will pay handsomely for it." Geralt exhaled quietly. So greed, not fear, was at the heart of this. The Reaper's rage hadn't been born from nothing. He moved silently through the brush, every step measured. He could end this with steel, but something in him stayed his hand. Instead, he slipped away, back toward Velen's Ford. There were answers yet to uncover, and the truth, as always, was tangled in the deeds of men. Behind him, in the depths of the forest, the Latian's whisper rose again, faint and cold as winter wind. The harvest is not yet done. Geralt didn't look back, but his hand stayed near his sword, all the same. Snow began to fall as Geralt returned to the village. The flakes drifted silently from a sky the color of ash, coating the rooftops and frozen paths in thin, pale layers. Velen's Ford looked no less bleak than before, but there was something different in the air now, an unease that seemed to thrum beneath the surface, as if the ground itself were holding its breath. He dismounted before the inn, leading Roach to the stable. The mare tossed her head and snorted, uneasy. "I know," Geralt murmured, patting her neck. "I don't like it either." Inside, the inn was half empty. A few villagers sat huddled around the hearth, their voices hushed. When the Witcher entered, they fell silent altogether. The innkeep glanced up, expression wary. "You're back," he said. "That mean it's done?" Geralt shook the snow from his cloak. "No. And it's worse than you think." The man's face paled. "Then it's true? The Reaper?" "Not a ghost," Geralt interrupted. "A Leshen, bound to the forest by a curse, old magic from before your grandfathers were born." A woman near the fire made a sign against evil. "A forest spirit? Then we're doomed. They can't be killed." "They can," Geralt said, "but it takes more than silver." He lowered his voice, his tone like cold iron. "Someone here disturbed the graves north of the ford, burned trees that were never meant to be touched. The Leshen's protecting what's left. You know who did it?" The innkeep hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Geralt's gaze was steady. "Men don't risk a curse for firewood. They do it for coin." A long silence followed. Then the innkeep sighed, his shoulders sagging. It was Captain Kurek, he whispered. Redanian officer. He came with men 3 weeks ago, said the Crown wanted to clear the forest, cut timber, make room for a road. The alderman protested, said the ground was cursed. Kurek didn't care. He paid gold for labor and set fires where he pleased. Geralt frowned. The alderman didn't mention that. He wouldn't. The captain threatened him, said if he spoke to outsiders he'd hang for treason. So that was the missing piece. Greed, as always. Men carving through the world without thought of what they woke. The Witcher rubbed his chin. Where's this captain now? They've camped south of the river. He said he'd be staying until the land's fit for use. Whatever that means. Geralt nodded once. Means I'll find him. He turned to leave, but the innkeep called out, voice trembling. Witcher, if you fail, the Reaper will come here next. It always moves after blood is spilled. Geralt paused at the door. Then hope I don't fail. He crossed the river by the narrow bridge, the planks slick with frost. Beyond lay the captain's encampment. 6 tents, a fire pit, and a pair of guards stamping their feet against the cold. The banner of Redania drooped limply in the wind. Geralt approached openly, hands visible, his medallion glinting faintly. The guards stiffened, spears raised. Easy, he said. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to speak with your captain. One of them frowned. You're that Witcher. Heard you were snooping around where you shouldn't? Maybe, but if your captain's as smart as he thinks he is, he'll want to hear what I found. The guard hesitated, then disappeared into a tent. Moments later, Captain Kurek emerged. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running from temple to jaw, and the cold eyes of a man used to giving orders. His cloak bore the royal insignia, though the mud on its hem told a truer story. Geralt of Rivia, Kurek said, voice clipped. I've heard of you. Thought Witchers stayed out of politics. I do, Geralt replied. I'm here for monsters. Yours just happens to be one you made yourself. The captain smirked. You mean that forest spirit? Old wives' tales? There's no curse, only peasants too stupid to cut a tree. Your men burned sacred ground, Geralt said flatly. That forest spirit is a Leshen, bound by druidic magic older than your kingdom. You've stirred something that won't rest until it's fed. Kurek's expression hardened. So what? You want me to pull back? I have orders to clear this land for the Crown's road. Then you'll have corpses for milestones. The captain stepped closer. Careful, Witcher. I don't take kindly to threats. Geralt's tone didn't change. It's not a threat. It's a fact. For a moment, neither man spoke. The fire crackled softly between them. Finally, Kurek gave a dismissive wave. I don't have time for your superstitions. Take your warning and be gone. If the creature comes for me, I'll deal with it myself. Geralt's lips curved in a thin smile. You won't get the chance. He turned to go, but the captain's voice followed him. If you interfere again, mutant, I'll put a price on your head. Remember that. Geralt didn't answer. He was already walking back toward the forest. Night fell quickly. The wind rose, carrying whispers through the trees. Geralt felt the shift long before the first howl echoed across the ford. The Leshen was awake. He found its trail near the ruins. Claw marks carved into bark, black sap dripping like blood. The air shimmered faintly thick with power. Then came the sound, distant screams, the crash of branches, the sharp ring of steel. The mercenaries. Geralt sprinted toward the camp. He arrived as chaos unfolded. The fire was scattered, tents ripped apart. Men ran through the snow, some cut down by roots that burst from the ground like living spears. Others were dragged screaming into the dark. The Leshen towered above them, antlers wide, its scythe glinting in the firelight. Kurek's sword flashed as he struck, cursing, shouting orders no one heard. His blade passed through the creature's shadow and met nothing. The Leshen turned its gaze on him, eyes like green fire, and the captain froze. Geralt saw the roots twist toward him. He hurled a bomb. The blast lit the night, silver dust burning across the clearing. The Leshen reeled, its form flickering. Geralt lunged, silver blade drawn, slicing deep into its side. The creature shrieked, the sound like the forest itself. Crying out, "Get back!" Geralt shouted, but the remaining soldiers were already dead or fleeing. The captain stumbled, half blind, his face cut and bleeding. What is it?" "Your consequence," Geralt growled. The Leshen struck again. Geralt met it head on, sword flashing. The fight was brutal and swift, steel against spirit, man against nature's wrath. Sparks flew, the ground cracked, and the air filled with the smell of ash and burning roots. At last, Geralt drove his blade into the creature's chest, twisting hard. The Leshen screamed and burst apart into shadow and ash, scattering across the snow. The oak in the distance groaned, splitting from within as the curse broke. When the silence came, it was heavy and absolute. Only the hiss of dying embers remained. Geralt stood over the ruin, chest heaving. Kurek lay nearby, pale and shaking. You killed it," the captain rasped. Geralt wiped the blood from his sword. "No, I ended the curse. There's a difference." The captain tried to rise, but his strength failed. "The road," he muttered weakly. Geralt looked at him with cold, golden eyes. "Let it stay buried." Then he turned and walked into the fog, leaving Kurek to face whatever ghosts still lingered in the ruin of his greed. Above, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, thin and fragile but clean. Yet in the wind that whispered through the trees, Geralt thought he heard the faintest echo of the reaper's voice fading into the distance. The harvest is done. For now. The day that followed was one of uneasy quiet. Snow drifted over the ruined camp, softening the shapes of broken tents and frozen corpses. The air reeked faintly of burned wood and blood, though the wind worked tirelessly to wash it away. Geralt moved through the aftermath like a ghost, his boots crunching over the thin crust of ice. He had seen such scenes before, too many times to count. War left graves, curses left silence. Both were fed by men's folly. The bodies of Captain Kurek's men lay where they had fallen, faces twisted in terror. The captain himself was gone. No footprints led away. The snow was undisturbed save for the prints of crows. Geralt crouched near the charred remnants of the fire pit and brushed aside a layer of ash. Something caught the light. A medallion shaped like a stag's head, half buried in soot. He recognized the markings at once, druidic. He turned it over, tracing the faint runes with a gloved finger. They pulsed with a lingering echo of life. Not from Kurek's men, older, much older. "Druid's token," he muttered. "So that's how the Leshen was bound." A faint rustle came from the trees behind him. Geralt straightened, hand on his sword. From the mist stepped an old man in tattered robes, his gray beard crusted with frost. His eyes were bright and sharp despite his age. "You've disturbed what should not be disturbed, Witcher," the man said softly. "I've ended a curse," Geralt replied. You're the druid who bound it? The old man inclined his head. Once, long ago, I was the keeper of these woods. I tried to protect them from men's fires and axes, but the war came and blood soaked the roots. The forest screamed and I answered. You bound a leshen to vengeance. I bound it to balance, the druid corrected, though his voice trembled. To guard what was left, until men forgot their greed. But the curse fed too long on hatred. When the soldiers burned the sacred grove, the spirit awoke twisted. It remembered the slaughter. It remembered me. Geralt studied him. You survived the binding? Barely. My brothers fled or were slain. I wandered for years, thinking the forest had forgiven me. His gaze dropped to the medallion in Geralt's hand. You found what remains of my oath. Geralt held it out. If the spirit's gone, the land should heal. The druid shook his head slowly. You destroyed its form, Witcher. But such things never die completely. The heartwood still beats beneath the oak. So long as the roots hold breath, the reaper's shadow lingers. Geralt frowned. Then I'll burn the heartwood. The old man smiled faintly, sorrow in his eyes. You can try, but it's not your fire that'll decide. The forest has a will of its own. Before Geralt could speak, the man turned and walked into the fog, vanishing like smoke. Only his footprints remained for a moment before the falling snow covered them too. By evening, Geralt had reached the oak once more. It loomed above the battlefield, vast and black against the fading sky. The air felt heavier here, as though the weight of centuries pressed down upon it. The Witcher unpacked his satchel and withdrew a flask of dimeritium oil and a small clay pot filled with phosphor resin. If fire could end this, he would see it done. He spread the oil along the trunk, careful and deliberate, tracing the old runes until they shimmered faintly. Then he struck flint to steel. The spark caught, flame licking greedily at the bark. For a moment the blaze burned steady, then the wind rose shrieking through the branches, and the fire guttered out as if smothered by unseen hands. The runes glowed crimson once more, pulsing like a heartbeat. So it chooses defiance, Geralt murmured. He drew his silver blade and pressed its tip to the trunk. The metal vibrated violently, his medallion along with it. A voice whispered from the roots, cold and ancient. You cannot reap what was never sown, Witcher. Maybe not, Geralt said evenly, but I can stop the rot. The ground shuddered beneath him. Cracks split the frozen soil, and roots coiled upward like serpents. Geralt leapt aside, rolled, and slashed through the nearest one. Black sap splattered the snow, steaming where it fell. More roots surged forward, seeking to entangle him. He cast a Quen sign, the magical shield flaring gold around him as he hacked his way clear. A shape rose from the base of the oak, part shadow, part flame. The Reaper again, though diminished. Its antlers were broken, its form frayed at the edges. Still, the voice that spoke was the same. You think yourself a savior, killer of beasts, yet you cull life as I do. Geralt's eyes narrowed. The difference is choice. He lunged, sword flashing in the flickering light. The blade struck deep, meeting resistance like ironwood. The Leshen screamed, its cry shaking the trees. Geralt twisted, drove the sword upward through its chest. A burst of green fire erupted from the wound, searing the night. For an instant he saw through the creature's eyes, the forest burning, men dying, a druid kneeling in despair as roots wrapped around him, pain, fury, and a longing for peace. Then it was gone. The Reaper's form dissolved into smoke. The oak split down the center with a sound like thunder. Light poured from the crack, then faded. The wind died. Geralt stood alone in the sudden calm. The oak's heartwood still glowed faintly, but the corruption was gone. He could feel it, the pulse of life returning, weak but pure. He cleaned his sword and sheathed it. "Sleep now," he said quietly. "You've earned it." When he returned to Velen's Ford, the villagers were waiting. They saw the Witcher coming from the forest, smoke still curling from his cloak, and they whispered among themselves. The alderman stepped forward, trembling. "It's over?" he asked. Geralt nodded. "The curse is lifted. The Reaper won't trouble you again." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Then the gods bless you, Witcher. We'll gather coin for your reward." Geralt's expression didn't change. "Keep your crowns. Use them to bury your dead properly." The alderman swallowed. "We will. But what of the forest?" "It'll heal," Geralt said. "In time, leave it be." He turned to go, but a small voice stopped him. The child with the wooden doll stood nearby, looking up at him. "Mr. Witcher," she said, "was the Reaper a bad man?" Geralt looked down at her, then at the gray sky beyond. "No," he said finally, "just a tired one." He mounted Roach and rode toward the road. Snow fell heavier now, soft and endless, covering the tracks of all that had come before. The village faded behind him, a dim light in the distance. As the forest swallowed him once more, Geralt listened to the rhythm of the horses' hooves and the sigh of the wind through the trees. For a long while there was only silence. Then faintly from far within the woods came the rustle of branches. Not hostile, not mournful, but almost like a breath of gratitude. He did not look back, for in his heart he knew that some stories ended not with victory or peace, but with understanding. And that was enough. By the third dawn after the Reaper's fall, the snow had deepened, and winter's hand lay heavy upon the land. The sun crept pale and low above the tree line, its light wan and colorless. Geralt rode east, his cloak drawn tight, his mind restless despite the quiet. He had left Velen's Ford behind, yet the echo of the place clung to him, the faces of the villagers, the whisper of the cursed forest, the hollow voice that had spoken from the heartwood. Such echoes rarely faded quickly. The road wound through hills scattered with black pines and stones half buried in frost. Once, long ago, these lands had known knights and castles, banners snapping over fields of gold. Now they were ruins and memories. The war had taken much, and what it left behind rotted slowly under the weight of neglect. Roach's hooves struck hard ground at last. Geralt guided her down a narrow trail toward a valley where the map promised shelter, a hamlet called Wencher. He needed rest and perhaps word of new work, but mostly he sought distance from what he'd seen. The forest whispered faintly as he passed beneath its boughs. He ignored it at first, though his medallion trembled once. A soft hum, fleeting. No danger, not yet. By midday he reached the outskirts of Wencher. It was smaller even than Velen's Ford, a scatter of cottages surrounding a crumbling chapel. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys, and somewhere a dog barked weakly. The scent of wood smoke mixed with something else, something acrid, like burned resin. Geralt slowed. There was unease here too, though of a different kind. Not the dread of something stalking from the woods, but a watchful tension, as though every door hid a secret. He stopped before the chapel. Its wooden doors were cracked, the iron hinges eaten with rust. Over the lintel someone had carved a sunburst, the symbol of the eternal fire. That explained much. He dismounted, tied Roach near a trough, and entered. Inside the chapel was dim and cold. Candles burned low along the altar, their wax pooling like tears. A priest stood at the front, draped in a red cloak, his head bowed over an open book. He looked up at the sound of Geralt's boots. His eyes flickered to the medallion on the Witcher's neck, then hardened. "You bring foul air into a holy place, mutant," the priest said. "Be quick with your business." "I'll be gone soon enough," Geralt replied evenly. "Just seeking shelter and news." The man closed his book with a snap. "News? You'll find only God's truth here. Unless you mean the plague that stalks the marshes, or the travelers gone missing on the northern road. If so, there is your news. Sin brings punishment." Geralt studied him for a long moment. "Missing travelers, you say?" The priest sniffed. "Aye. A merchant's caravan vanished 2 nights past. The guards were found come dawn, throats torn open. Some say wolves, others say devils. I say it is retribution." "Retribution doesn't usually leave claw marks," Geralt murmured. The priest's lip curled. "You witchers see monsters in every shadow." Geralt's eyes glinted faintly in the candlelight. "Experience." He turned and left before the priest could answer. Outside, the cold bit harder. He walked north, following the road until the cottages thinned and the marsh began. The air grew thick with mist. Reeds rose from half-frozen pools, whispering as the wind passed through them. Tracks appeared in the slush, boot prints, cart wheels, and beside them something else. Long, narrow marks, too deep for wolves. Geralt crouched, fingertips brushing the edge of one print. The ground was crusted with frost, but beneath it lay a smear of dark blood, already congealed. The prints led toward the marsh proper, where the fog thickened into a white wall. He drew his steel sword and moved carefully. The smell of rot grew stronger. Beneath it came another scent, sweet and metallic, blood mixed with decay. He knew it well. The first body lay half submerged in a pool, armor torn open like paper. The face was gone, devoured to the bone. Geralt studied the wounds. The flesh had been slashed by something curved, almost serrated. Not claws, mandibles. "Necrophages," he muttered. "Ghoul pack, maybe an owl ghoul leading." He heard movement to his right, a slithering shuffle. Then another sound, soft and guttural, like breathing through water. Geralt turned slowly, sword raised. The creature rose from the reeds, hunched and pale, eyes gleaming yellow, its jaw split unnaturally wide, blackened teeth dripping filth. A ghoul, and where one was found, others were never far. Geralt muttered a sign under his breath. "Igni!" Flame burst from his hand, bright and sudden. The ghoul shrieked, recoiling, its skin blistering. 2 more emerged from the fog, skittering low, fast. Geralt pivoted, slashed one across the spine, and kicked the other backward into the water. The first lunged again. He met it with steel, cleaving its head clean. The second hissed, half submerged before sinking with a gurgle. Silence followed, then the heavy splash of something larger. Geralt's medallion trembled violently. He turned just as the water erupted. The thing that rose was not a ghoul. It towered above him, a mass of slick scales and sinew, its body half serpent, half man. Its eyes glowed faintly green. A muck-nixer, one of the old water fiends, born of drowned souls and corrupted alchemy. It lunged with surprising speed. Geralt rolled aside, feeling the rush of air as its claws struck the ground where he'd stood. He came up in a crouch, swung low, cutting deep into its thigh. Black ichor sprayed, hissing where it struck the snow. The creature howled, the sound warping the fog itself. Geralt pressed the attack, slashing again, but the mucknixer's tail whipped around, striking him hard across the chest. He hit the ground, breath driven from his lungs. The world spun. The fiend came again, jaws gaping. Geralt thrust his hand out. Erden? A ring of violet light flared beneath him. The creature stepped into it and slowed, its movements dragging as though through honey. Geralt rose, pivoted, and drove his sword through its neck. The blade stuck deep. He wrenched it free as the creature collapsed with a wet, gurgling cry. For a long moment nothing stirred, only the slow hiss of steam from the corpse. Then the marsh fell silent again. Geralt cleaned his sword, breathing steadily. The air reeked of blood and rot, but he felt no more tremor from his medallion. The threat was ended. Yet something in the stillness felt wrong. Too sudden, too complete. He crouched beside the body, studying it. There was a brand scorched into the creature's hide, a sigil of the eternal fire. He frowned. So the priest knows more than he's saying. The snow began to fall again, thick and silent. Geralt rose, sheathed his sword, and turned back toward Wensher. The marsh whispered behind him, but the sound no longer spoke of hunger or fear, only of secrets buried deep, and the Witcher intended to uncover them before the next night fell. Night descended on Wensher like a shroud of iron. The mist from the marsh crept between the cottages, curling under doors and through cracks in the walls, until the whole village seemed to breathe with a damp, uneasy life. Geralt moved through the gloom without haste, the faint rattle of his armor the only sound that dared disturb the silence. He had returned from the marsh, long after sunset, his sword stained and his thoughts heavy. The fight had been clean, but the sigil, branded into the mucknixer's flesh, gnawed at him. The eternal fire was no stranger to fanaticism, yet the mark on the creature suggested more than zeal. It spoke of deliberate creation. Someone had bound that monster to faith, and faith in such hands was always cruel. He stopped outside the inn. Its windows glowed dimly through the fog. Inside, the fire crackled, and a few weary souls muttered over cups of ale. As Geralt entered, conversation faltered. All eyes turned to him, then quickly away. The innkeep, a gaunt woman with streaks of gray in her hair, wiped her hands on her apron. "Back from the marsh, Witcher?" she asked cautiously. "Find what's been killing folk?" "I did," Geralt said, his voice low. "It's dead now, but it wasn't nature that spawned it." The woman's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Someone made it." A heavy silence followed. A man near the fire spat into the ash. "Don't say such things. Not here. The priest, he'd have your tongue for it." Geralt's eyes flicked toward him. "You fear your priest that much?" The man shifted uneasily. "He says he serves the fire, says it cleanses, but folks who speak against him, they vanish, always at night. Sometimes we find what's left of them in the marsh. Sometimes we don't." Geralt leaned his elbows on the counter. "And you let it happen? What choice do we have?" The woman whispered. "He came with soldiers once from Novigrad. Said the village was unclean, burned the old shrine by the crossroads and built his chapel over it. Ever since then, the marsh has been restless. But to him, it's proof the fire is working." Geralt's expression darkened. Fanatics see their own light even in shadow. He pushed a coin across the counter. "A room until dawn." The innkeep nodded mutely and handed him a key. He slept little. Dreams came fitful and strange, faces twisting in firelight, the hiss of water over stone, the druid's voice whispering from beneath the earth. When he woke, the embers in the hearth were cold. Outside, dawn struggled against the fog. Geralt strapped on his gear and stepped into the chill. The air smelled of wet wood and smoke. Bells rang from the chapel, low and steady. The priest's sermon had begun. He followed the sound through the square. Villagers gathered before the chapel doors, heads bowed, lips moving in unison as the priest's voice carried over them. Sin breeds shadow, and shadow calls to monsters, the man declared. Only the flame burns pure. Only through suffering is the world cleansed. The crowd murmured assent. Geralt watched from the edge, unseen for the moment. He studied the priest, tall, thin, his face drawn tight like parchment over bone. His eyes burned with a feverish light. At his throat hung a heavy medallion shaped like the sunburst of the fire. Beside the altar lay a wooden crate draped with cloth. Beneath it, Geralt caught the glint of metal and glass. Vials, small and precise. He recognized them instantly. Alchemical. So that was the truth. The priest wasn't merely preaching purification. He was practicing it. When the crowd dispersed, Geralt approached the steps. The priest turned sharply, his expression curdling into disdain. You again. Have you come to mock faith, mutant? I've come for answers, Geralt said. Found your mark on a muck nixer in the marsh. The same symbol you wear. The priest's eyes narrowed. Blasphemy. You defile even the dead with your lies. Geralt stepped closer. That thing was branded, priest. Alchemy and faith don't mix by accident. You made it or helped someone who did. The priest raised a trembling hand. You know nothing of divine work. The fire demands purity. Those creatures were born from sinners' flesh, shaped to burn the wicked from this world. Geralt's jaw tightened. You experimented on people. They were already lost, the priest hissed. Thieves, drunkards, heretics. The fire remade them into instruments of cleansing. Geralt's gaze turned to steel, and when they turned on you, for the first time, uncertainty flickered in the priest's eyes. They strayed. The fire tests all who serve it. Tests you by feeding on your victims, Geralt said coldly. You unleashed plague and death and called it piety. The priest's voice rose. You dare judge me? You who kill for coin? You who walk cursed among men? Geralt said nothing. The silence between them grew sharp as glass. Then the priest's expression hardened again. Leave this place. If you speak your heresy to my flock, I will have you chained and burned before nightfall. Geralt turned his back on him. You'll burn yourself first. He walked away, though he felt the priest's eyes like knives at his back. That night the marsh woke again. Geralt was ready for it. He stood at its edge, moonlight silvering his hair, the surface of the pools black and still. He had prepared traps, Irden runes buried in the mud, oils slicking his blade, bombs lined beside him. The priest's creations had to have come from somewhere, and if he had made one monster, there would be more. The fog thickened, curling around his legs like claws. Then came the sound, a low gurgling chant, words half-formed and wrong. Figures moved in the mist, not ghouls, not drowners. They walked upright, wrapped in rags, their skin raw and glistening. Their mouths opened and closed soundlessly, eyes blind yet burning faintly with that same green fire. Geralt raised his sword. Gods damn you, priest, he muttered. The creatures charged. Steel flashed. He met the first with a downward cut cleaving through bone. The second lunged. He sidestepped, drove his blade through its chest, and tore free. Black blood splattered the snow, the air filled with their keening cries. He fought as the witchers of Kaer Morhen were taught, precise, unrelenting. The Irden traps flared, slowing the beasts, while Igni's fire seared the mist. One by one the things fell, burning, writhing, shrieking, until only smoke remained. When the last was still, Geralt stood among the corpses, his breath steaming in the cold. His medallion was still vibrating faintly, not from danger, but from something else. A pulse, a resonance deeper than magic. He turned toward the village. Flames flickered in the distance, the chapel. By the time he reached it, the building was ablaze. Villagers had gathered outside, faces pale and terrified. The priest stood on the steps, arms raised, his cloak aflame at the edges, his voice booming above the roar. "The fire purifies. The impure are undone. Bear witness, my flock, for I ascend." Geralt pushed through the crowd. "Get back," he shouted. But none moved. They stood frozen, bewitched by the spectacle. The priest's medallion glowed like molten gold. Light poured from his eyes and mouth. The air warped, and Geralt smelled sulfur and alchemy, unstable mixtures reacting to the heat. Then the explosion came. The blast threw him backward. Fire leapt skyward, the chapel splintering like kindling. When the roar faded, only embers remained. Geralt rose slowly. Among the ashes he found what was left of the priest. Bone and metal fused together. The sunburst medallion lay half-melted beside him. He kicked dirt over the embers and turned away. The villagers said nothing. Some crossed themselves, others simply stared at the ruin, faces hollow. Geralt mounted Roach and looked once more toward the marsh, now silent under the moon. "Monsters," he said quietly, "take many shapes." Then he rode north, leaving Wencher behind to its smoke and its silence, the faint smell of burnt faith lingering in the air long after he was gone. The road from Wencher wound through frozen moors and skeletal forests where the wind howled like a starving beast. Geralt rode for 3 days beneath gray skies that never cleared, the snow deepening around him until Roach's hooves sank to the fetlocks. The Witcher kept his hood drawn, his thoughts distant. He had seen too much fire in Wencher, too many bodies twisted by blind faith and folly. It left a taste like iron in his mouth. On the 4th morning the clouds thinned, and sunlight broke across the hills. It gleamed faintly on the horizon, revealing a line of ancient standing stones jutting from the snow. The place was marked on no map, yet he knew of it by rumor. Cadweni traders called it the Hill of Sighs, said to be haunted by voices of the fallen. Others said it was a barrow ground, older than any kingdom still standing. Geralt dismounted, scanning the field. His medallion trembled, faint but insistent. Magic lingered here, old and potent. He moved between the stones, their surfaces etched with runes worn near smooth by centuries of wind. At the hill's heart stood a single monolith, taller than the rest, black as obsidian. Snow lay untouched around it. He crouched, brushed his glove across the stone's base. The surface pulsed faintly under his touch like the beat of a slow heart. He withdrew his hand at once. Not a grave then, something else, a seal. The wind changed. A whisper brushed his ear, soft, indistinct, yet unmistakably human. "Witcher?" He turned, sword half drawn, but the field was empty. Only the whisper returned, drifting through the stones. "You freed the forest, burned the fire's priest, yet the balance falters still." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "Who's there?" "One who remembers, one who was bound." A shape formed in the air. Before him, coalescing from mist. It was the druid he had seen in Valen's Ford, or what was left of him. His body was translucent, his face pale as smoke. The eyes burned with the same faint green light that had haunted the Reaper. "You?" Geralt said quietly. "I thought you were dead." "In part I am," the spirit replied. "When you broke the oak's heartwood, my spirit was freed from its roots. But freedom is not peace. The Latian's fall tore a hole through the old wards that held the northern wilds. Other things had begun to stir." Geralt sheathed his blade. "What things?" The druid's form flickered. A darkness from beneath the world. The Reaper was its warden, though he did not know it. Now the ward fails, and the dead rise restless. The Hill of Sighs is the first gate. You feel it, don't you? Geralt's medallion vibrated like a living thing. "I feel it," he said grimly. "Then you must seal it again," said the druid. "But beware, the gate demands a price." Before Geralt could speak, the spirit's light flared, then vanished. The wind died with it, leaving the world in absolute silence. He stood a long while staring at the monolith. He had seen many curses, but few that spanned centuries. Whatever this was, it lay deeper than the folly of priests or the wrath of monsters. He knelt, traced one of the runes with a gloved finger, and murmured a witcher's incantation of detection. The stone answered, not with light, but with sound. A sigh, long, low, mournful. The ground trembled. Cracks split the snow at his feet. From beneath, a cold wind surged upward, and with it, a voice. Not one, but many. "Help us. Free us. Remember us." Geralt drew steel. The air shimmered, and shapes rose from the cracks. Figures of pale mist, clad in tattered armor. Ghosts of soldiers, hundreds of them, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. The dead of a forgotten war. The Witcher braced himself. "So you're what's been sighing." The nearest spirit drifted forward, voice like the rustle of leaves. "Our blood was spilled for crowns, now rusted to dust. We were promised rest. We found only silence." Geralt kept his sword ready. "What do you want?" "To be remembered," said the ghost. "To be released." "Release means peace. Peace means you leave this world. I can help with that if you let me." The spirits murmured among themselves. Then the first one spoke again. "You would seal the gate?" Geralt nodded once. "Then face what guards it," said the ghost, and vanished. The ground split open. From the darkness beneath the monolith came a roar that seemed to shake the sky. Snow burst outward as something vast and horned clawed its way free. Its body was a fusion of bone and black flame, its eyes pits of endless night. Geralt recognized it instantly. An ancient graveborn, a specter born when hundreds die in one place and their hatred fuses into flesh. A creature older than any church or crown. "Fine," he muttered, drawing his silver sword. "Let's end this." The beast lunged, claws raking the stones. Geralt rolled aside, striking at its flank. His blade met resistance like tempered iron. Sparks flew, but the creature barely flinched. It swung a massive arm, the impact hurling him through the air. He hit the ground hard, snow exploding around him. He staggered to his feet, breathing sharp and shallow. Signs first, Yrden to slow it, Axii to break its focus. He raised his hand and cast the sigil. The rune circle flared beneath the beast, its movements faltering. Geralt darted in, slashing low, slicing tendons of shadow and bone. The graveborn bellowed, black fire spilling from the wound. It swung again. He leapt back, hurled a moondust bomb. The explosion of silver light seared the darkness, and the creature reeled. Geralt saw his chance. He raised his sword in both hands, whispered the Witcher's battle prayer, and struck deep into the creature's chest. The air screamed. The monolith shuddered. For an instant, all sound vanished. Then the Graveborn collapsed, crumbling into ash that scattered like smoke on the wind. Geralt dropped to one knee, his breath clouding in the cold. Around him, the spirits of the fallen shimmered faintly, their faces calm for the first time. "You have done what kings and mages could not," whispered one. "The gate closes. The hill of sighs will sleep again." They bowed one by one, fading into the snow until only silence remained. The Witcher rose slowly. His medallion had gone still. He looked to the horizon, where dawn's light spilled across the white hills. The monolith was cracked but silent now, the runes dim. Another curse ended. Another wound closed. Yet deep inside, Geralt felt the weight of the druid's words linger like a thorn. The Reaper had been a warden, not a monster. And if there was one gate, there might be others. He mounted Roach, turned northward, and rode on. The wind carried the faintest echo behind him, soft, almost like a sigh of gratitude. Or perhaps a warning. He did not look back. The road stretched long ahead, and though the snow hid all tracks, he knew more darkness waited beyond the next horizon. The road north led Geralt through the Caedwini wilds, where pine forests stood like solemn sentinels beneath a sky of bruised steel. The Witcher rode in silence, his cloak drawn tight against the chill wind that whispered through the trees. The encounter at the Hill of Sighs lingered in his mind like a half-forgotten wound. Though the spirits had been freed, he could not shake the druid's warning. The gate demands a price. By the second day, the land began to change. The woods thickened, their branches heavy with frost. The air smelled faintly of resin and damp earth. Geralt dismounted to give Roach rest and walked beside her, the snow crunching beneath his boots. His medallion lay still, yet his instincts prickled. The silence here was too deep, too perfect. As dusk crept over the forest, he spotted the faint glow of lanterns ahead. A wayfarer's inn perched beside a frozen stream. A faded sign swung above the door. The Hanged Man's Rest. The name was not promising, but warmth and food would do. Inside the inn was dim but welcoming. A hearth blazed, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. A few travelers sat at rough-hewn tables, their eyes hollow from the road. Behind the counter stood a stout woman with arms like seasoned oak and a stare that could cut steel. Geralt nodded a greeting. "Room for a night?" She eyed his swords but said nothing, only gestured to a table near the fire. "Aye. Supper first. Room after. We don't like guests dying of cold before they pay." Geralt allowed himself a faint smile. Fair enough. He sat, ordered stew and ale, and listened. The inn's murmur was quiet but uneasy. Men spoke of disappearances along the northern road, of caravans vanishing without trace. One said he'd seen lights in the trees, blue and flickering like will-o'-the-wisps, yet too steady for swamp fire. "Ghosts?" another whispered. "Worse," said an older man, his voice low. "Hunters, they say. Not of flesh, but of souls. Pale riders on horses of bone. Come out of the fog when the moon's high." Geralt glanced up from his bowl. "Wild hunt?" The man nodded uneasily. "Aye. Some call them that. Others say they're the dead of the north, come to collect what the wars left behind." The Witcher said nothing, but his stomach tightened. He had chased the hunt once before, years past. He knew the scent of that terror, yet these tales felt different, more local, more grounded. Phantoms born not of prophecy, but of something fouler. After his meal, he went to his room, a narrow space under the eaves. warm enough and dry. He sat by the window, sharpening his blades, the whetstone's rasp steady in the silence. Outside, the forest loomed black against the stars. Then faintly came a sound. Bells. He frowned, set the whetstone aside, and opened the shutters. Across the frozen stream, pale shapes moved between the trees, figures cloaked in mist, mounted on skeletal steeds. Their armor gleamed faintly, though no torch lit them. The sound of the bells came again, soft, rhythmic, like funeral chimes. Geralt's medallion quivered. He grabbed his swords and moved swiftly down the stairs. The innkeep looked up in alarm as he passed. "Witcher? What's wrong?" "Stay inside. Bar the door." He stepped into the cold. The night was still, the snow untouched, yet the air shimmered faintly as if the world held its breath. The riders had vanished, leaving only their echo. Geralt followed the sound of the bells into the forest. Frost-laden branches creaked overhead. The moonlight painted the snow in shades of silver and shadow. He moved silently, each step measured. Then from the darkness ahead came a cry, a man's voice raw with terror. Geralt broke into a run. He found the man slumped against a tree, blood darkening the snow at his feet. His chest had been opened from throat to navel, but not by steel. The wound was too clean, too deliberate. Ritual work. The man's eyes flicked weakly toward him. "They took her." "Who?" Geralt demanded. The man's lips moved, but only a whisper came. "The pale ones. The riders." Then his head sagged, and he was still. Geralt rose slowly, scanning the trees. The air around him shimmered again, and from the mist stepped a figure cloaked in gray. It wore no armor, only robes, and its face was hidden beneath a hood. In its hand gleamed a curved blade, white as frost. "Leave this place, Witcher," it said, voice soft but carrying. "The dead have claimed it." Geralt's hand went to his sword. "You're no ghost. Who are you?" The figure tilted its head. "A servant of balance, the same balance you disturb wherever you tread." "I hunt monsters," Geralt said. "You speak like one." The figure moved closer, the air chilling around it. "You mistake purpose for evil. The souls taken by war wander without rest. We lead them home. By tearing out hearts? They must be emptied of their pain first." Geralt's tone turned to iron. "I've heard enough." He drew his silver sword, and the night erupted. The figure moved like smoke, its blade singing through the air. Geralt parried, sparks bursting where steel met spirit. The creature struck again, faster, forcing him back through the snow. Each blow rang like a bell, echoing through the forest. He cast the Quen sign, the shield flaring gold. The next strike glanced off it, and Geralt countered with Igni. Fire roared, catching the figure's robes. It shrieked, its voice splintering into a dozen echoes. Geralt pressed forward, driving his blade through its chest. The figure dissolved into mist, leaving behind only a faint whisper, "You cannot stop the hunt." The forest fell silent once more. Geralt stood alone, steam rising from his armor. His medallion still vibrated faintly, though the presence was gone. He wiped his blade clean, scanning the darkness. The dead man's words lingered. They took her. Somewhere nearby, others might still live, or worse, linger between life and death. He found the trail easily enough. Hoof prints burned into the snow, glowing faintly with residual magic. He followed them north until the trees thinned and the ground began to rise. There, half buried in frost, he saw ruins, stone walls blackened by age. A tower collapsed in on itself, the remains of a keep. The hoof prints led straight to its gates. Geralt stopped at the threshold. The wind howled through the gaps in the stone, carrying with it faint whispers. He smelled blood, old and new. "Another gate," he muttered, and stepped inside. The courtyard lay empty save for broken statues and bones scattered beneath the snow. At its center stood an altar of obsidian, cracked but pulsing faintly with inner light. Above it hung a body, woman, young, her face peaceful despite the frost, clinging to her lashes. Chains of silver bound her wrists, and her heart had been removed with surgical precision. Geralt's jaw tightened. He touched the chains. They burned cold. Necromantic work. Whoever these riders were, they served not death itself, but someone who sought to master it. He turned as the air behind him shifted. Another sound. The soft jingle of bells. From the shadows beyond the altar, more riders emerged, their pale armor glinting beneath the moon. At their head rode one taller than the rest, his helm fashioned from a stag's skull, eyes burning with blue flame. "So," the Witcher murmured, "the hunt, truly, rides again." He drew his blades, the steel and silver gleaming in the moonlight. The leader raised a skeletal hand, and the bells tolled once more, low and dreadful. Then they charged. Snow erupted, steel clashed, and the keep awoke to war. The bells tolled again, deep and cold, as the pale riders descended upon him. The sound rolled through the ruins like thunder across a graveyard. Geralt met the charge with steel in hand, his breath misting in the frigid air. Snow and shadow became one, as hooves struck the earth and blades flashed with the blue light of sorcery. The first rider came fast, swinging a cleaver forged from bone and rune. Geralt pivoted aside, his sword catching the blow at an angle that sent sparks showering across the stones. He countered with a slash to the creature's flank. The blade bit deep, shearing through armor that cracked like ice. The rider toppled from its saddle, dissolving into frost before it hit the ground. The others circled, silent save for the sound of those ghostly bells. Their steeds were not horses, but wraiths of ash and smoke, hooves leaving no prints. Geralt's medallion thrummed as if caught in a storm. He could feel the magic here, thick, ancient, hateful. It clung to the ruins like a curse. The leader dismounted. He was tall, his armor etched with runes older than the conjunction itself. The stag's skull upon his head gleamed in the pale light. "White Wolf," he said, his voice a rumble that carried through the night, neither echo nor breath. "You stand where the living are forbidden?" "I've stood in worse places," Geralt replied, his tone steady. "Who are you to forbid me?" The figure tilted his head. "Once I was a king, now I am a keeper. The gate beneath this place leads where none should tread. You've already broken one seal. Will you unmake the rest?" "I close doors, not open them," Geralt said. "Your kind's been stealing souls. You killed the man by the trees. Why?" "Because he disturbed the gate," the Wraith King replied. "And the girl you pity upon that altar, she was not taken. She was offered. The living cling to life, but their dead call to them. We only answer. You expect me to believe that? I expect nothing. But when the veil tears again, it is not our hunt that will ride. It will be what sleeps beneath. You cannot kill what is bound by the void." Geralt raised his sword. "We'll see." The king's eyes flared brighter. "Then so be it, Reaper of Men." The riders charged once more, their cries rising into a haunting chorus. Geralt's world became motion, blades striking, snow flying, flashes of red and silver and blue. He cut through one rider's neck, ducked beneath another's lance, cast Igni in a wide arc. Fire roared, consuming mist and armor alike. Still they came. A lance pierced his shoulder, burning like frost fire. He gritted his teeth, ripped it free, and hurled it back, impaling another wraith through the chest. It screamed, its voice splitting the night. Then the king was upon him. The stag helm's shadow fell across the snow as he swung a blade black as obsidian. Geralt parried once, twice, the force of the blows driving him backward. He caught the next on the flat of his sword, pivoted, and struck low, slicing across the wraith's leg. The blade passed through, but the wound sealed instantly. "Fleshless things don't bleed," Geralt muttered. "Nor do they tire," the king answered, striking again. The Witcher dropped low, rolling clear. As the great sword crashed into stone, he came up with a bomb in hand, demeridium dust. He threw it at the wraith's feet. The explosion flared white, cutting through the magical hum of the air. The riders shrieked, reeling as the spell fields collapsed. The king staggered, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. Geralt leapt forward, silver sword raised high, and drove it through the stag helm's chest. The wraith let out a sound that was not a scream but a sigh, long and low. The bells fell silent. The other riders vanished like smoke caught in a gale. Only the king remained, impaled upon the Witcher's sword. He grasped the blade with both hands, pulling Geralt closer. "You think you've won," he rasped, "but the hunt was never ours. We serve what waits beyond the dark." Geralt wrenched his sword free. "Then I'll deal with that when it comes." The wraith fell, his body breaking apart into snow and embers. Silence followed. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Geralt stood amidst the ruins, chest heaving, shoulder bleeding where the lance had struck. The woman on the altar hung limp, untouched by the chaos. He approached and examined the chains that bound her. They were forged of pure silver, each link engraved with sigils of warding, not to bind her spirit, but to protect it. The truth came slowly. She had not been a sacrifice. She had been the anchor, the barrier between life and what lay beneath. The riders hadn't stolen her heart to kill her. They had needed it to open the gate. And now with their fall, the gate pulsed again, faint but growing stronger. The obsidian altar throbbed with a dull red light. Cracks split the ground around it, and from those cracks came a whisper, colder than death. "You cannot hold the dark forever, Witcher." Geralt stepped back, his hand instinctively going to his sword. The air smelled of sulfur, of earth freshly turned from the grave. He muttered a curse under his breath. He could not seal this alone. He gathered what reagents he had: salt, blood, a fragment of the Leshen's heartwood he had kept as a token, and began to work. He carved runes into the snow, each stroke careful, methodical. He drew upon the signs, layering Erden's circle over ancient druidic symbols. The wind rose, carrying with it faint whispers that clawed at his mind. When the final rune was set, he spoke the last word aloud, a name so old it hurt to say. The ground convulsed. The altar split apart, light pouring upward in a column of white fire. The whispers turned to screams and then to silence. When it was done, the ruins lay still once more. The gate was sealed, weakly perhaps, but sealed nonetheless. Geralt wiped blood from his mouth and sheathed his sword. He looked to the woman's body, still hanging motionless. Gently he freed her from the chains and laid her upon the ground. Her eyes were open but peaceful, her expression one of release. "Rest now," he murmured. He built a small cairn of stones over her, marking it with the sign of the wolf. It was not a holy burial, but it was enough. When he was finished, dawn had begun to break. The light spilled across the snow, turning it to gold. The ruins no longer pulsed, and the air no longer whispered. For the first time in many nights, the forest felt truly dead, and that was a comfort. Geralt mounted Roach, his breath misting in the pale morning air. The mare stamped once, uneasy, sensing the residue of magic. "It's done," he said quietly, though whether to her or to himself, he did not know. He looked back only once, at the hill and the cairn, and the black stones rising behind them like sentinels. The hunt might have been broken here, but their words lingered. "We serve what waits beyond the dark." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Then it waits in vain." He spurred Roach forward. Snow rose in her wake, catching the first light of dawn as the Witcher rode toward the horizon, where the world lay wide and silent, and the promise of another contract waited in the mists ahead. Snow fell thick and slow as Geralt rode from the ruins. The wind had turned bitter, carrying with it a taste of ash. Though dawn had risen pale over the treetops, the world felt no lighter. His shoulder burned where the lance had pierced him. He had bound it as best he could with linen and alchemy, but the pain throbbed like a second heartbeat. For a long time the Witcher rode without thought, the forest stretching endless in every direction. He followed no road, only instinct, the faint pull of his medallion, the whisper of old magic that clung to him still. The druid's words from the Hill of Sighs echoed faintly in his mind. The Reaper was a warden. The gates demand a price. If the hunt had guarded one gate and the Reaper another, then the world hid more of them, scattered scars from wars long past, when sorcerers and druids meddled with what lay beneath the world's skin. Geralt had never been one for prophecy or the grand designs of mages, yet fate had a habit of dragging him into such things all the same. By nightfall he found shelter in a hunter's cabin perched on the edge of a frozen lake. The door was ajar, snow drifted across the floorboards, and the hearth cold. Yet the place was sound enough. He brought Roach inside, brushed the frost from her mane, then set to kindling a fire. Soon warmth returned, filling the small room with a smell of pine and smoke. He stripped off his armor and poured white gull into a tin cup. The potion burned his throat, dulling the ache in his shoulder. When the fire crackled steady, he sat by it and let the silence close around him. It might have been sleep that took him then, or a trance born of fatigue. But the Witcher dreamed. He stood once more at Valen's ford. The mist was thick, the river whispering under ice. From the fog emerged the Reaper, its scythe trailing sparks across the ground. Yet this time the creature did not raise its weapon. It knelt. "You took my burden," it said. But the balance shifts still. The darkness wakes beneath the world. "It calls to you, White Wolf." Geralt's hand went to his sword. "I don't serve the dark, nor do you serve the light. You serve the path between two, but paths end even for those who walk alone." The mist rose higher, swallowing the world. From its depths came other figures. The druid, the priest of the eternal fire, the pale king with the stag helm, all watching, all silent, their faces blurred into one another until they became only shadows. Then came a sound, faint and familiar, the toll of bells. Geralt woke with a start, hand on his sword. The fire had burned low, yet the sound persisted, faint but real, echoing across the frozen lake beyond the walls. He rose, pulled on his armor, and stepped outside. The night was clear, stars sharp as shards of ice. The lake stretched wide before him, its surface dusted with snow. At its center, something glowed. A circle of faint blue light beneath the ice. He approached cautiously, boots crunching on the frozen surface. The glow pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. His medallion quivered. Beneath the ice lay shapes, too many to count. Human bodies, pale and still, their faces turned upward as though in prayer. And at the very center, half buried, lay a sword. Its hilt was carved of bone, its blade black as obsidian. Geralt knelt, brushing frost from the surface. The sword's runes shimmered faintly. Ancient words, older even than elder speech. He could read only fragments: gate, guardian, blood-bound. The ice beneath him groaned. A crack split across its surface, spidering outward. "Damn it," he muttered, and leapt back just as the lake erupted. A column of blue fire tore through the ice, and from it rose a figure, tall, armored, wreathed in mist. Its helm was faceless, its voice hollow. "You unseal what others bled to bury." Geralt drew steel. "I'm not the one breaking seals. I'm closing them." "Then you are already too late," said the figure. "The dark stirs in the deep. The gates weaken one by one. When the last falls, the world will drown in shadow." The Witcher's grip tightened. "Then I'll hold it back." The figure tilted its head. "You cannot fight what was made before men had names. But you may yet slow it if you take the blade." Geralt hesitated, glancing at the sword beneath the ice. "And the price?" The figure's tone did not change. "All gates must have a guardian." The Witcher said nothing for a long moment. The wind howled over the lake. Then slowly he lowered his sword. "If I refuse, then another will take your place. Perhaps one without your restraint." Geralt's lips thinned. He stepped forward, placing his gloved hand upon the frozen surface. The sword pulsed once, as though alive. The ice melted beneath his palm. When he grasped the hilt, the light flared blindingly. Pain seared up his arm, through his veins, into his chest. He gasped, teeth bared, as the fire carved its mark into him. The world spun. When it cleared, the figure was gone. The lake lay still once more, the bodies beneath turned to stone. Geralt stood alone, the black sword in his hand. Its weight was strange, light as air, yet heavy as memory. His medallion hung silent, as if in awe. He sheathed the blade and turned back toward the cabin. Each step left faint trails of frost behind him. His shoulder no longer ached. Even the air felt different, sharper, listening. Inside, the fire had burned out. Only embers remained. He sat and stared at the sword laid across his knees. It hummed faintly, not with malice, but with hunger. The hunger of something bound and patient. He remembered the druid's words. The reaper was a warden. The gates demand a price. So this was his price. When morning came, he packed his gear, saddled Roach, and left the cabin behind. The sun was pale, the snow unending. The world looked unchanged, but he could feel it now, the faint pulse of the dark beneath the earth, beating in rhythm with his own heart. He did not know how long he would serve as this new warden, nor whether he could ever lay the burden down. But for now, the path still stretched before him, endless and cold. Geralt of Rivia, Witcher, monster slayer, and now perhaps something more. A reaper once again, though not the kind whispered of in taverns. As he rode into the light of the rising sun, the wind carried a voice faint and distant, like the rustle of old leaves. "Guard well the gates, White Wolf, for when they fall, all that you fought for will be devoured by the dark." He did not answer. He simply rode on. his shadow long across the snow, the black sword at his back, whispering softly, a promise and a curse bound in steel. The wind over the northern steppes sang in a long, low note like breath drawn through a blade's edge. Snow swept across the plains, swallowing the horizon in white. Geralt rode through it, with his head bowed, the black sword bound across his back. It hummed faintly, a cold whisper against his spine, as though aware of something stirring far ahead. 3 days had passed since the night on the frozen lake, since he had taken the blade. 3 days, and not a moment of true peace. The sword had not left his side, nor would it, it seemed. He could feel its pulse through the leather scabbard, faint but steady, as if it shared his heartbeat. He'd tried once to throw it away. It had returned before dawn, lying beside his bedroll like a loyal hound. Now the Witcher's path carried him toward Ard-Carré, the Caedwini capital, where he hoped to find a sorcerer or sage who might know more of this weapon that bound itself to him. But his path turned first through the frost fields, a stretch of wild tundra said to be cursed. Few traveled it in winter, fewer still returned. As dusk fell, Geralt found an abandoned way station, little more than a hut and a half-collapsed stable. He tied Roach beneath the lean-to, gave her a measure of oats, and entered the hut. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and old blood. A fire pit lay cold in the center. He crouched beside it, striking flint to steel. Sparks caught in the tinder, and soon a modest flame licked upward. Shadows danced over the cracked walls. Geralt poured himself a mouthful of Caedwini spirit from his flask. The warmth bit pleasantly at his throat. It was then that he heard the whisper, and at first he thought it the wind through the chinks of the wall. But the voice grew clearer, weaving around the edges of the firelight. White Wolf. Geralt turned, hand on the hilt of his sword. The room was empty. The wind outside had died. You took the blade. Now it takes you. He drew the black sword halfway from its sheath. It gleamed faintly, runes pulsing like embers. The voice came again, deeper now, like the murmur of water under ice. The gate wakes. The dark stirs beneath the mountain. The seal weakens. Geralt's jaw tightened. I've sealed one already. And you broke another, the voice replied. Each death, each gate feeds the same hunger. You carry it now. The fire guttered low. For an instant the walls seemed to breathe. He saw faces in the smoke, pale and hollow-eyed, the dead he had freed from the Hill of Sighs, the villagers of Velen's Ford, the priest of Wencher, all gazing silently toward him. Enough, Geralt said. You'll not take me. Not yet, the voice said, but when the last gate falls, you will stand where the world ends, and then you must choose. The fire flared suddenly, bright as noon. Geralt staggered back, shielding his eyes. When the light dimmed, the voices were gone. Only the whisper of the wind remained. He sat down slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You're losing your mind, old man, he muttered to himself, but his medallion was cold now, utterly still. Whatever had spoken was no trick of madness. He lay awake long after, listening to the wind sweep through the cracks. The sword rested beside him, black and silent. When sleep finally came, it brought no dreams. Only a sense of weight pressing down upon him as if the earth itself held its breath. By morning the snow had stopped. The sun rose pale and weak behind thin clouds. Geralt saddled Roach and pressed on. The frost fields stretched vast and empty before him. Here and there, stone markers jutted from the drifts. ancient cairns left by travelers long dead. The silence was so deep that even Roach's breath seemed loud. Toward midday, the Witcher saw smoke rising ahead, a thin gray column twisting into the sky. He rode closer, wary, and soon made out the ruins of a village, half buried in snow. Roofs sagged under ice, doors hung broken. The smoke came from a single hut near the square. Geralt dismounted, his medallion faintly vibrating. He approached the hut, pushing the door open. Inside, a fire burned low, and an old woman sat by it wrapped in furs. Her face was lined as a dried apple, her eyes sharp despite her age. "I knew you'd come," she said without turning. "You've the advantage then," Geralt replied. The woman smiled faintly. "Not I. The sword you carry. It sings in my bones." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "You know it?" "I know its kind. Black steel from the deep forge, hammered before men walked the earth. It was made to guard the gates that bind the hollow places, those where the world's breath leaks into the dark." "Who made it?" "Not who," she said softly, "but what? The first keepers. Spirits bound in flesh. They built the gates and forged the swords that could seal them. Each blade chooses a warden when the time comes." Geralt touched the hilt at his back. "So I've been chosen?" The old woman nodded. "For now. But such gifts are never free. Every gate sealed feeds the sword. Every death it witnesses binds it tighter to its bearer. And when the last gate closes, then the sword will have no more need of its keeper. It will seek another." Geralt was silent for a moment. "You're saying it will kill me?" The woman met his gaze. "It will finish what it began. The Reaper's blade harvests not life, but the debt of those who wield it." Outside, the wind howled again. The fire flickered blue. The old woman's face seemed to waver, and for an instant her eyes glowed with faint green fire. The same hue he had seen in the Reaper, in the Druid, in the Leshen's Heartwood. "Another gate lies east," she whispered, "beneath Mount Morn. The old dwarven roads lead there still. If you wish to end what you've begun, that is where your path turns." Geralt's voice was quiet. "And you?" "I am only what remains of those who forged the blade. When you took it, my watch ended." She smiled again, faint and sad. "The world will not thank you, Witcher, but it will remember you if it endures." The fire dimmed. When Geralt looked again, the chair was empty. Only a pile of furs remained, and beneath them, dust. He stepped outside into the pale daylight. The village lay silent, its snow-covered roofs gleaming like bone. He mounted Roach, turning her eastward. The path ahead wound toward the mountains, black peaks rising like jagged teeth on the horizon. The sword at his back pulsed once, faint and steady, as though approving. Geralt exhaled a long, clouded breath. "Mount Morn, then," he said, and with that he rode on into the snow, where the wind swallowed the sound of hoofbeats, and the light faded behind him, toward the place where the next gate waited, and the shadow beneath the world stirred in its sleep. The mountains rose from the plains, like the broken bones of a dead god, jagged and cold beneath the gray sky. Mount Morn, black as iron and ancient as legend, towered over them all. Snow swept down from its peaks in endless sheets, veiling its scars and secrets. The Cadweni called it the Mother of Crows, for none who climbed her slopes returned whole, if they returned at all. Geralt of Rivia rode slowly toward her shadow, Roach's breath steaming in the chill. The sword across his back whispered faintly, humming through the air with each step. It was not a sound he heard with his ears. but one he felt in his bones. The closer he drew to the mountain, the stronger it became, like a pulse deep beneath the earth answering to his own. The Witcher's eyes traced the trail winding upward into the mists. It was no road, merely the remnants of an old dwarven path carved through the cliffs. The stones were slick with frost, the air thin and sharp. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled, though no storm could be seen. By dusk he reached the first of the dwarven outposts, a ruin of black stone towers, their gates shattered and their halls buried in snow. He dismounted and led Roach into what shelter the crumbling walls could offer. The silence here was heavy, broken only by the distant cry of a raven. Inside the ruin, the Witcher found carvings along the walls, runes and pictographs half lost to time. They told of miners who had delved too deep, who found not gold or iron, but something living beneath the rock. The images grew wilder as they went, showing fire, blood, and shadow. In the final carving, dwarves knelt before a dark figure holding a sword of black steel. Geralt's hand brushed the hilt of the blade on his back. "So," he murmured, "this isn't your first time here." The wind moaned through the ruins, low and mournful. He lit a small fire in a sheltered alcove and set to cleaning his weapons. The heat did little to drive away the cold. His thoughts turned to the old woman in the frost fields, to her words of the sword and its keepers. Every death it witnesses binds it tighter. He had seen enough death to forge 10 such bonds. When sleep came, it was uneasy. In his dreams, he walked beneath the mountain. The walls glistened with frost, and veins of blue light pulsed through the stone like blood through veins. He heard the clatter of chains, the murmur of voices speaking in a language older than men. At the end of the tunnel waited a door of iron, sealed by runes that burned like dying stars. Another gate, he thought in the dream. The voice of the blade came to him then, as soft as snow and as heavy as judgment. The last. He woke before dawn, sweat freezing on his brow. The fire had died to embers. Outside, the wind howled like a beast in pain. Geralt rose, gathered his gear, and began the climb. The path narrowed as it rose, twisting between cliffs and ravines. Ice glittered on the rocks, and more than once Roach stumbled, snorting in protest. The Witcher led her by the reins, his boots sinking deep in snow. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became, until even the wind fell away. At last he reached a vast fissure in the mountainside, a cavern mouth black as pitch. The sword's hum deepened, vibrating against his spine. He stepped inside. The tunnel sloped downward, its walls slick with frost. Strange crystals jutted from the stone, glowing faintly with inner light. The air smelled of old metal and something else, something alive. The deeper he went, the louder the sword whispered. Closer. Geralt ignored it, pressing on until the tunnel widened into a great chamber. The roof vanished into darkness. In the center stood an altar of black stone, carved with the same runes he'd seen in the dwarven ruins. Around it lay the remains of ancient warriors, dwarves, elves, men, all long dead. Their bones gleamed faintly as though dusted with frost. The Witcher approached. The air here was thick, pressing down like deep water. His medallion vibrated against his chest, warning of power beyond measure. The sword drew itself from its sheath before he could stop it. It hovered in the air, its runes flaring bright as a dying sun. Geralt stepped back, shielding his eyes. From the altar rose a shape of shadow and flame. It coalesced into something vaguely human, tall and terrible, its eyes twin fires burning in the void. When it spoke, its voice filled the chamber like the rumble of earth itself. At last, it said, "The warden comes to his charge." Geralt steadied himself. "I came to seal the gate, not to serve it." The shadow laughed, a sound that cracked the air. "You already serve. The moment you took the blade, you became part of the binding. There is no seal without a keeper, no gate without a key. You are both." "I have seen what your kind leaves behind," Geralt said coldly. "I've seen the Reaper, the Hunt, the cursed dead. If you think I'll stand aside and let you wake—" "You misunderstand," the voice interrupted. "I am not the dark that devours. I am the dark that endures. The light burns and dies. I remain. Without me, there is no balance. But the seals weaken. The world forgets what it owes the dark." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "You want me to protect you, to preserve what must not be broken. And if I refuse, then the gates fall one by one, the void will spill forth, and all your little wars, your kings, your monsters, they will be nothing but dust." The chamber shuddered. Cracks split the walls, glowing red within. Geralt could feel the mountain tremble above him. He looked down at the sword, still floating in the air, its runes blazing like fire. "You made this," he said. "You bound it to men like me. Men strong enough to bear the burden. Few remain." The Witcher's breath steamed in the cold. He thought of Velen's ford, of the Reaper kneeling in the mist, of Wencher's burning chapel, the priest consumed by his own flame, of the pale king and his riders bound by their duty until death and beyond, all of them keepers, all of them damned. Geralt stepped forward and grasped the sword's hilt. The fire flared, blinding him. The voice rose once more. "Take up the burden, guard the gate, or see your world consumed by what waits beyond it." He closed his eyes. "So be it." The light swallowed him. When it faded, he stood alone in the chamber. The altar was gone. The corpses had turned to dust. The sword lay quiet in his hand, its runes dim. The mountain was silent again. Geralt sheathed the blade and turned back toward the tunnel. As he climbed into the gray light of dawn, he felt no triumph, only the cold weight of understanding. The gates would hold for now, but each victory carved its mark deeper upon him, and somewhere in the shadows of his mind, a voice whispered, still, patient and certain, "You are the last warden, White Wolf. When you fall, the dark will rise again." Geralt rode down the mountain in silence, snow swirling in his wake. The path ahead stretched long and uncertain, and though he could not see it, he knew the end drew nearer with every step. Yet he did not falter. The Witcher had never feared monsters. He feared only the price of killing them. And now that price had come due. The snows of Mount Morn faded into the low valleys of Kedwin, where the rivers ran black under sheets of ice, and the wind whispered through the pines like the voices of the long dead. Geralt rode southward once more, following no map, only the sense that something behind him had not ended, that some part of the mountain's darkness had followed him down. The sword at his back was silent now, yet its weight seemed greater than any he had carried before. He crossed through forests where no bird sang, where even the wolves had gone quiet. The world felt paused, as if waiting for a sound that would never come. Each night, when he camped by a dying fire, he dreamed of doors beneath the earth, of flames that burned without heat, of a heartbeat that was not his own. When he woke, the sword gleamed faintly beside him, and the feeling that he was being watched lingered like frost on his skin. On the fourth night, he reached the outskirts of a town called Hinderfell, a place of miners and stonecutters built around a river gorge. It should have been alive with the sound of forges, but as Geralt approached, he found the streets empty. The snow lay untouched, yet the doors of the houses hung open, and no smoke rose from any chimney. His medallion quivered. Whatever had emptied this town had not gone far. He dismounted, hand resting on the hilt of his steel sword. Inside the nearest house, he found overturned chairs, half-eaten bread, and a trail of blood leading toward the river. The smell was thick, iron and rot. He followed it through the narrow lanes until it ended at the frozen bank. There the ice was broken, jagged around a dark hole. Something moved beneath it. A ripple passed under the surface, slow and sinuous, like a great serpent turning in its sleep. The Witcher crouched, eyes narrowing. "You've chosen the wrong meal," he muttered. The ice cracked again, and a shape burst upward, pale, enormous, its hide covered in scales that shimmered like wet stone. It opened a maw filled with teeth the size of daggers and roared, the sound echoing through the gorge. A hydra, though changed by something darker, its eyes burned with the same cold blue fire that had haunted him since the Reaper's forest. Geralt drew steel and rolled aside as one of its heads struck. The impact shattered the ice where he'd stood. He came up, slashed low, the blade biting deep into the nearest neck. Black blood hissed on the snow. Another head lunged. He ducked beneath it and cast the Igni sign. Fire roared forth, searing the creature's flesh. The hydra screamed, the air filled with steam and the smell of burning rot. It struck again, faster than its size should allow. The Witcher was flung back, his armor dented, his breath leaving him in a rush. The sword across his back pulsed once, then twice, as if answering the creature's rage. Geralt rose to one knee, eyes narrowing. "If you want a share of this, then earn it," he said through his teeth, drawing the black blade. The runes along its edge flared with pale light. The air around him grew colder, the snow hissing underfoot. When he swung, the blade cut, not through flesh, but through the shimmer of the creature's life itself. The hydra convulsed, its roars turning to whispers that tore the air. One head fell, then another. The last one lunged desperately, but Geralt met it mid-strike, plunging the sword deep between its eyes. The creature froze. Its massive body stiffened, then crumbled into ash that blew away on the wind. When the echo faded, the Witcher stood alone beside the broken ice. The sword glowed faintly still, runes throbbing in time with his pulse. Beneath the surface of the water far below, he glimpsed movement, light, slow, and rhythmic. A gate, he thought, another heart of the world's old curse, buried beneath the river's flow. He sheathed the sword slowly. "Not today," he said. "One is enough." From the cliffs above, a bell rang once, hollow and distant. Geralt looked up sharply. At the edge of the gorge stood a figure wrapped in a tattered cloak. For a heartbeat he thought it a phantom of the hunt, but the voice that carried down was unmistakably human. "You sealed the mountain," it called, "and woke the valley." Geralt climbed the slope to meet the speaker. The man was old, his beard thick with frost, eyes fever bright. He bore the robes of a scholar, though torn and filthy. "I'm no priest," Geralt said. "Say what you mean." The man smiled thinly. "They said the Witcher walks with a dead god's sword. I came to see if it was true." Geralt's hand rested lightly on the hilt. "And what do you see?" "Balance," the man murmured. "The dark and the light, bound together in flesh. You carry both whether you know it or not. The gates will hold while you live, but not forever. Already the old ones stir beneath the seas, in the deserts, in the mountains of Nilfgaard. When the last gate opens, even the Witcher's steel will not suffice." Geralt's gaze was steady. "Then I'll close that one too." The scholar shook his head. "Every gate closed is another heart bound. You will not outlast them all." "Maybe not," Geralt said, "but I'll outlast you." He turned to leave. The man's laughter followed him down the slope, thin and dry as breaking glass. When Geralt looked back, the cliff was empty. He rode until the town was a blur behind him, the wind rising once more. Night fell quickly, clouds swallowing the moon. The sword's light pulsed faintly, casting shadows across the snow. He found shelter beneath an ancient pine and kindled a small fire. The flames burned low and blue, flickering strangely in the cold air. Geralt sat beside them, staring into the heart of the fire until it seemed to form shapes. Faces he had known, places he had left behind. He saw Kaer Morhen's walls buried in snow, saw Yennefer's eyes like violet embers, saw the Reaper kneeling in the fog. The sword whispered softly, almost kind. "All things end, White Wolf, even balance." Geralt rubbed a hand over his face. "Then I'll keep it alive a little longer." The whisper faded and the forest grew still. He leaned back against the tree, closing his eyes, listening to the steady breath of the wind. Dawn would come soon, pale and cold, and with it another road, another burden. The world would keep turning, gates opening and closing, light and dark locked in their endless dance. When morning broke, the Witcher rose, mounted Roach, and rode into it. Snow drifted around them like falling ash, and the sun shone weakly through the clouds, painting the world in gray. Behind him the black sword hummed softly, a song of steel and sorrow, of duty that never ends. Geralt of Rivia, last warden of the gates, rode on through the dying winter, his shadow long upon the snow. Whether the world would endure, or whether the darkness would claim it at last, none could say. But for that day, for that hour, he rode still, unbroken, the white wolf against the endless dark.